Hi, everybody. Roy here. We're at Simple. A few days after we had our biggest snowstorm, I think we had 14 inches of snow fell on last Friday, which was quite an event. So I think we have a special day planned. I got Mike Nowak is here, who some of you know and some of you may not know.
Is he here? Is he in the room?
He's really here. It's a big surprise for me that we got to come up to the north
I had to
here.
drive 700 miles to get here.
So
and all the snow as well.
So you're probably wondering,
is there snow in the United States?
Who is this guy? Who is Mike, and what does he have to share? What do we kind of discuss together? So, Mike, I think, can you introduce yourself? I mean, you do a much better job than I would.
Well, I can try to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I will.
I've known him for how many years?
About 20 years, I would think.
Yeah. A little over that, but close. And it's all about gardening. We'll get to that, but it's all about gardening.
Well, we probably won't talk any gardening at all. We have so many stories to tell, and some of them actually are about gardening. But first of all, I'm not surprised. I wore my little cardigan in honor of Roy, and of course he's wearing something like that because he is the most laid-back person in horticulture. He's kind of like the Perry Como or Mr. Rogers of horticulture.
There's probably a lot of people who have no idea who Perry Como is.
Or Mr. Rogers.
Or
well,
Mr.
unless
Rogers.
they know Tom Hanks and they know him from the movie.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
I just imagine you going out into one of your gardens and singing, "It's a beautiful day in the ecosystem."
Or catch a falling star.
Yes.
And put it in your pocket and save it for a rainy day.
Yeah.
You could do that too.
Would you be mine?
Yeah.
Yes. Won't you be my eco neighbor?
And you can see Mike's with his personality. I first heard him on the radio.
Really?
Remember radio?
Was I on the radio?
WGN. It was in the late 90s. I was driving to visit my parents in Mountain Home, Arkansas in early February. And you had a gardening show.
Yep.
On a Saturday. So that's where I got to listen.
And that was at a time when I knew almost nothing about gardening. So that's why I was on the radio. That's how that works. And it was with Kathy O'Malley, who was, she had a daily show with Judy Markey at WGN at the time. And she and I were both avid novice gardeners. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she wanted to do a gardening show. And she knew that I had worked on her daily show as a contributor to it, doing comic bits and other things in engineering, because I was an engineer, actually a board op at WGN for almost 25 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's right. But actually before then, I was, people ask me, what's your background in horticulture? And I say showbiz, because I ran a theater company in Chicago for a decade before all of this. And that kind of led up to and at the time I was paying for it because non-equity actors in Chicago don't make any money. Of course, horticulture people don't make any money either. So as you know, not very
we
much.
earn a living. I have to say we earn a living, but we're not money makers.
No,
for sure.
You can. Although there are some people who've made killing. On this.
Yeah.
Like Bill Radler. Do you know who Bill Radler is?
Yeah.
Oh, see, you're one of the few people. Yes, he did the knockout rose.
Knockout roses. Yeah.
And got rich because I asked him. This is years ago. This is almost 20 years ago, and I was going to interview him on WGN, and
he's from Milwaukee, too.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's from Milwaukee.
Wow. And so I did a pre-show interview with him, and I said, "Hey, Bill, I got to ask you a question. You bred the knockout rose, and it's probably #1 selling plant all over the planet.
#1 landscape rose.
Yeah,
was.
And I said, I got to ask you, are you rich? And he said, well, you're not going to ask me that on the radio, are you? And I said, no, I wouldn't do that. And I didn't ask him that. But I said, I just got to know, are you rich? And he paused for a minute, and he said, yeah.
Well, I probably rich for horticulture.
Well, for horticulture.
For horticulture.
I mean, because, like I said, it's one of the tenets of horticulture is that you're not going to get rich.
When did you make the change to strictly gardening from all those other tasks.
Well, so you mean my showbiz?
Well, you were going from show business to board manager to
board manager.
Managing how you run a board to make the radio work.
Engineering.
Engineering.
Board op at
board op.
WGN. Yeah, I was doing the board op work, but I was always still interested in entertainment. I was still doing acting on the side, even though I stopped running the theater company about a decade into it. We were extremely talented and incredibly dysfunctional. And that's a lot of artists are. And the whole thing sort of imploded. Yeah. And so I moved on, but I was still doing the board op work. And I was the engineer for Wally Phillips for the last night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
A lot of you out there probably don't remember him.
Yeah, a lot of you have no idea. Look it up, Wally Phillips. So anyway, in the meantime, while I'm at GN doing this, my partner Kathleen and I we bought a vacation home in Washington State, in the middle of a temperate rainforest, okay, on Lake Quinault. And if you haven't been to the Pacific Northwest yet, those of you watching this, please go immediately before it's gone, because you get off the airplane at SeaTac and the air just smells different. I mean, the temperate rainforest is just, and there's only, 3 or 4 of them in the whole world. One in Chile and one in New Zealand where they shot Lord of the Rings. And then in the Pacific Northwest, which stretches all the way from like mid-Oregon all the way up through
Vancouver,
a lot of, much further into Alaska.
Wow.
I mean, that's all temperate rainforest there because it's the maritime influence. And we had the house it was on National Forest land, so we didn't own the land, but we owned the house. A peculiar arrangement that the National Forest Service has. So we paid a fee each year so we could have the house. And I was fascinated by the flora there, and I started learning about the plants and the trees and the shrubs and the perennials there. And I realized that I knew more about the flora in the Pacific Northwest than I did in Chicago, where I lived, where my home was.
That the plants harvested you. They collected. They brought you into their world.
And if I knew what I knew then, what I know now, there was very early on, maybe even the first or second time we were there, we were visiting a natural trail in the Pacific Northwest, and this woman had just scored this sword fern that she dug out of the ground, and it was this big, and she was carting it to her car. Knowing what I know now, I would have tackled her and punched her in the face. Okay, but at the time,
she dug this.
She dug it up.
She just
said, "I'm taking this home with me," and it's from a natural area. And that's one of the things I've learned over the years. I guess we'll get to that. But at any rate, so I realized I knew all this stuff about those plants. I didn't know anything about the plants that were around me here in the Midwest. And I lived in the Midwest my whole life. So I decided to take a Master Gardener course, University of Illinois, and became a Master Gardener. And about that time is when Kathy was starting the show. She said, "Do you want to sit in with me?" And I said,
you could tie that together with the show then.
Yeah, that's kind of how it came together, because I was fascinated by plants. I wanted to grow them.
What caused that?
What do you mean?
Well, how'd you go from a board engineer, an entertainer, all of a sudden you're fascinated by plants?
I always wanted to grow plants. Kathleen and I, early on, we rented an apartment. We rented forever, and then finally bought a house in Logan Square. But early on, when we had a backyard that the landlords would let us grow things in, we did. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was growing amaranthus and what are the I can't think of it. The annual that looks like a little lollipop.
Gomphrena?
Gomphrena. See, this guy knows. He knows his stuff.
And I don't grow annuals, but
I know. But he knows.
I still
Gomphrena, and we would get the strawberry Gomphrena because that was the best color. I liked it much more than the purple or the white.
They're entertaining. They are cool.
And they're harder to grow, apparently. I discovered over the years. So anyway, so we already had an interest, and then we had the house in Pacific Northwest, and I was gardening there, which was weird because in a rainforest, and we would go away for, months at a time and come back, and everything would be completely overgrown. Yeah. And the first thing I would have to do is whack down all the weeds and the grasses that had grown up around, and that would take me a couple of days. So there wasn't much time to actually garden. It was weird. After a while, I started having nightmares about cutting back blackberry canes. You know how a blackberry cane, especially in the Pacific Northwest, they get terribly out of control. After a while, I had nightmares about having pruners and attacking blackberry canes. So I came back and learned this stuff, and Kathy was doing the show and said, "Would you like to sit in with me?" I said, "Yeah, that'd be fun." And then after a while, they started paying me for it. And then after 2 years, she said, I'm not going to do this anymore.
2 years of doing it, there's a lot you got involved in of things you didn't know that now you know.
Well, one of
the question is when you're answering questions for people.
But here was the thing, though. We thought the show was going to be, hey, just a couple of amateur gardeners sitting around, and we'll take the phone calls, and everybody will provide advice, and we'll all talk to each other like we're leaning over the fence, and let's just talk about our gardens.
And here comes Bob Giuliano, the Italian from across the street that knows everything. My dad had a name for that. My dad used to call him Professor Jundak in Berwyn, and that was the neighbor that knew everything. So it could be any guy. You're changing your oil wrong. You don't know how to drive your car. You're not washing your car right. So every neighborhood has a Professor Jundak that knows everything about grapes or leaves.
There is, except that that's not what happened here. What happened here was, because people are trained when they listen to radio, they're trained to have a guru sitting behind the mic who knows everything. So they weren't interested in having a conversation about plants. They came in asking questions. Hey, how do you do this? What's that? How do you do? And we were, let's bring in an expert and we'll figure this out.
You'd have to make a call at that time because you kind of didn't know.
We really didn't. And then we realized, and then especially when I took over the show, I said, okay, I'm just bringing in experts here. And I'm going to be the guy. I know enough to ask questions and maybe even ask the right questions. And then that turned into 26 years of doing that for me. At WGN, then WCPT, and WCGO in Evanston, Illinois. And then after that, that was during the pandemic.
And you were weekly at home. Summer too.
Every
Summer,
spring, week. And people say, well, what are you going to talk about in the winter? I said, are you kidding me? There's never a dearth of topics to talk about. And when it comes to gardening, you can talk about stuff. I could do it every day and find something to talk about. In fact, I never had enough time.
That's why horticulture is so unique. It has its endless possibilities of plants from all over the world to local. Horticulture covers everything. I mean, like Jerry Wilhelm, a friend of mine, he's writing a whole book on native lichens.
I like them too. Thank you very much.
He can put that in the book too.
But I mean, for instance, if we were doing a day like today, looking out and seeing all the snow here, I would do a show on what chemicals you should use to dissolve salt, dissolve ice, and which are plant safe, which are pet safe, that sort of thing. And just so you know, folks, rock salt is the worst, okay? It's the absolute worst, okay? You're just going to kill your plants. Your dog is not going to be happy, and it's going to go into your lakes and streams, and it's going to cause havoc. Okay, just saying.
It's still popular.
Of course it is, because it's the cheapest. I mean, that's the problem. And we're going to save a nickel and destroy the planet. All right? This is not a good bargain. This is not a good trade-off. All right? So that was the deal. I ended up bringing a lot of guests on, and even by accident, over 26 years, you're going to learn stuff. And then in the pandemic year, 2020, I decided, let's just live stream this from my dining room table, because the technology is there, as you know, setting this up, and you folks can't see the cameras and how this is all working.
Right.
But it's never been easier if you know a little bit about what you're doing.
When you started with Kathy, what were some of the earliest questions you had that you kind of said, I should know this, but I really don't know anything about it? Now, there's simple questions like someone could ask me right now, how do you properly stake a tomato? I don't know. I've never staked a tomato in my life, so I don't really know what I'd call them.
I actually know the answer to that.
That's what's cool.
Well, except that I also know that you don't need to stake a tomato.
Oh.
It's kind of up to you. It's a matter, I mean, it's like pruning tomatoes. It's still controversial. Some people say, yeah, you need to prune tomatoes to get a better crop. And from what I've read, some people say yes, some people say no, some people say, what's the point, you know?
So it could be based on a lot of either needs, space, or there could be a lot of reasons for not.
Yeah, it's usually, in my case, it's about space, because I have a tiny little yard.
Yeah.
It's like 10 by 20 no, I'm sorry, 20 by 30 in my backyard in Chicago. And unfortunately, I planted 6 trees in it. Now, they're small trees, and 2 of them died. Did you know I killed a ginkgo? Very few people are able to kill ginkgos. I managed to kill a ginkgo. It's a tough tree.
How do you think it passed away?
I'll tell you how it passed away. I grew sweet woodruff, which is a non-native. It's a lovely plant, and you can make wine out of it, especially if you live in Germany, right? But it forms this dense mat. And I have a lot of shade in my yard. And it turned out it was a wonderful place for sweet woodruff. Sweet woodruff just said, oh, this is the coolest thing ever. We're so happy to be here. And I had a mat of it around the base of my ginkgo tree. And the ginkgo tree was probably 20 feet tall. It was not that old, maybe 5 or 6 years old. And one wet spring, I looked up and the leaves were turning yellow on the ginkgo. And I'm looking, okay, what, did it get a disease? Ginkgos don't get that. You know, I'm going to the book and going online, and ginkgos don't get diseases like that. It's just, what's going on here? And I talked to an arborist friend of mine, Sean Kingzett, who's a wonderful, wonderful arborist. Yeah. And he said, stop looking up. He says, look down. This is where all the problems, and this is what you learn in horticulture. Right. Everything is at ground level or slightly below it, okay? I went, okay, so I looked down, and there's this mat of sweet woodruff completely around the base of the tree. So I pulled away the mat, and the bark had rotted all the way around the tree. I went, I didn't even know that was possible. Yeah. All right. So it's like the volcano mulch.
I would say you point out that mulch, same thing.
It's like volcano mulch, folks. And you know that mulch that people pile up at the base of a tree, which is exactly the wrong thing to do. You want it away. Don't ever let it touch the flare of the tree. Do it like a donut, out like that. But landscaping companies still do that. And this is what could happen. It could rot. So it even could be
it could be lamium could do that too. Any dense ground cover.
I don't know. I suppose maybe lamium could do
anything that's dense and tall, 6 to 8 inches tall.
Yeah, it was pretty thick. Yeah. And so subsequently, basically, I ripped all of the sweet woodruff out of my yard. I said, okay, you're done. Yeah. On the other hand, I didn't get all of it, and some of it pops back, but there's not enough. You know, the idea, the wonderful thing about a small space like most gardeners have is you can control anything. I mean, people come to me about Creeping Charlie. And they say, how do I get Creeping Charlie out of my lawn? And I said, did you just buy the house? No, I've had it for a long time. I said, then you haven't been paying attention, have you? Because you let it invade. Right. Because if it goes, like I have a neighbor who has Creeping Charlie in her yard. And it comes under the fence and it goes into the garden bed, because I happen to have a garden bed right there. Well, if it's in the garden bed, you just go, you just pull the sucker out.
Take your hands and
you can just pull it out just like that, no problem, and keep it at bay. Once it gets into the lawn, however, now you're in a world of hurt, because the roots intermingle.
And it takes mowing, mowing too.
And not only that, it's these folks come sometimes in a garden club or something, they'll say, how do I get rid of it quickly? And I go, I'm not playing that game with you, because you've let this happen over 5 years, 10 years. How long has it been?
Mm-hmm.
And now you want me to tell you what poison to give you to get rid of it tomorrow.
That's how most occurrences are things that people let happen in their garden. First, they started because they didn't know this was going to happen. Right. Then there's even reseeding perennials. Well, why would I take that out? I paid for it. And all of a sudden, they've got a whole garden of Echinacea purpurea.
Which is not a bad thing,
it's seeded everywhere.
Or Rudbeckia.
Yeah, it's seeded everywhere.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why weren't you thinning it? Well, why should I do that? I paid for it.
But you didn't pay for the new plants.
No, but
you paid for the original plants.
They just felt they were taking out something of value.
The logic escapes me. There is no logic in that.
Well, it's logical to them. Just like, I guess, for me, like I don't cook that much.
Uh-huh.
And people would say, well, you could save so much money if you made more meals. And it's logically true. I could save more money.
Yeah.
But since I don't know how to appreciate cooking, it takes up too much time because I have other things to do, like stay outside till dark, is what my goal is.
Of course.
I love being outside.
I know, and that's what
so
you're
spend
so
a little
focused
bit
on
more
your
money.
plants. Yeah.
Well, it's like, and at night, I learned this from Pete Outoff. I was visiting Pete Outoff. It was 2008, and it was probably 5 in the afternoon, 5:30. I'm wandering around his property, and I couldn't find him. Well, where is he? It's light out. So I'm wandering, and I catch he and Anya are sitting on the porch with a table filled with cheese and crackers and a little knife there. They both had 2 glasses of wine. And I'm thinking, my God, I got 3 hours of light left. You could be working. And that's what I did at Northwood. I worked till dark because it's seasonal. And Pete,
Roy, you got to bring the wine out into the garden sometimes.
Well, but that's what Pete told me. He goes, Roy, we are working. I said, what do you mean? We're talking about what happened during the day. We're talking about the phone calls I've got to make. We're talking about the people I need to connect with. And I realized that's even more important sometimes than addressing a weed issue or something I have. Because sometimes I wouldn't call. I wouldn't know what people had called me, and I lose my integrity with them. And once I lose my integrity with the clients, I got to go back and rebuild my integrity.
Oh, God. I can't even imagine you losing integrity with your clients.
You blow them off because they call you.
Because you're drinking wine, right?
No, they were 4 or 5 days ago. And then I haven't called them back in 4 days, and I think how embarrassing if I call them back 5 days later. Then I don't call them. How about
at 2 months or 6 months or a year? It's happened to me where people they just ghost me and they're gone, and you just wonder what happened to them. And I've done that to people as well. I'm not proud of it.
No, but from that experience talking to Pete, work isn't just being out there doing something with the plant. Work is also assessing what's happened that day and what you can fix or clean up tomorrow or the day after. So I learned now I don't work till dark. I work till about 6 o'clock, then I do a little glass of wine, and I walk around, I assess the garden, and I think about what happened that day and how I can change the perspective.
I work till dark, but that's because I don't usually get out into the garden until 3 p.m. So
well, you have a different schedule.
Well, it's I'm not a morning person. I'm really not, and I think it's my entertainment background. Mm-hmm. We would do theater, and you finish the show at 10:30. You're
and you probably go out to eat something.
Oh yeah, you go out and you have something. You get home, it's midnight. It's 1 a.m. Mm-hmm. I don't want to get up at 6 and watch the sunrise. Are you kidding me? Come on, man. But it's different styles, and I find I do a lot of my gardening in the afternoon, in the evening. So often I am out there until dark, and the danger is, of course, you're going to lose your tools. That's what's going to happen. But it doesn't bother me. But 6 p.m. comes. It's you grab a glass of Merlot and you bring it out into the yard, and
you kind of assess that's what I like to do.
Yeah.
So when did things in the show change so that you felt more comfortable answering questions? That took a year or two?
No. To this day, I'm just terrified.
Because you have skills. All the things you've learned over 26 years that you've come to know.
There's a few things.
You know a lot of stuff.
And I have some opinions.
And
I do read. I continue to read up on stuff. But I'm a little reticent to call myself a guru. I mean, I don't call myself a guru. I don't want anybody to call me that because I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm a guy who asks questions.
Yeah.
And that's what I like doing. In fact, I should be asking you questions.
Well,
here.
I think you then you can ask more profitable questions of people because now you have an idea of what the question, how to form a better question because you have knowledge more than you had before. So you ask
exactly. If you know
much better
something about the
questions.
subject,
Yeah.
you can. I find that one of the things I like about long form interviews, like the one we're doing here, and unless you chop it into bits, you better let me know if that happens, pal. Is that the good questions don't even come until 20 minutes in, is what I found over the years. Now, unfortunately, in the 21st century, we no longer have attention spans.
People have tuned us out already.
Oh, yeah, the people
we're
who
gone.
didn't want to see, oh my God, the minute I didn't start in and answering their garden questions at 30 seconds,
See you
they're
later.
gone. Bye.
They're gone.
See ya. I can't help that.
Yeah.
That's not the way I roll. And I have discovered that the longer you talk to somebody, the more interesting their contribution is going to be. Generally. I mean, you can get some really pretty dull people.
Right.
But if they know a lot, then you finally home in on what it is that you really want to ask
Well,
them.
and key, for me, when I think about what is it I know, the first thing I think about is all the things I don't know. Then I think about all the things I don't know. When I come to realize and know something, what am I going to do with that information?
Do you know Donald Rumsfeld? I'm just wondering.
No, this
there
is
are
just
known unknowns.
this is just
an unknown.
This is just a way of looking at things because we have a whole world of stuff like I don't know about.
Okay, well, see, and I'm with you.
Yeah,
So you're asking me all over 26 years. I've learned a lot. Yes, I have. Okay, and I'm not afraid to go into a garden club and tell people about this, or to go on live stream or on the radio or wherever, or do an interview like this and expose my knowledge or lack thereof. But there's still, I don't want to sit there and be peppered with questions about how to do this in the garden, because one of the things I've learned about gardening, and I hope you agree with this, is that you can do it slightly different ways and still get the same results. You know,
True. Like I was just talking to Jerry Wilhelm, and he brought something to my attention that I thought was so cool. As we're working now at Yerkes Observatory trying to create Aboriginal soil.
Which is just the most amazing. The Yerkes thing is just so cool. Because growing up, I thought I was going to be an astronomer. I actually took an astronomy course in college at the University of Michigan. And then when I realized it was all about math, I said, oh, well, this is not going to work. Okay, we'll move on to something else. So I went into broadcasting. So,
what I learned, that if I see a perennial garden, say I walk around and look at our gardens at Northwind or a perennial garden, say, out in Fontana, and I think to myself, boy, everything looks really healthy. The plants are everything's looking good. You know, they're collecting light energy, sharing resources. There's not much to do here right now. But that does not mean the soil is healthy. The soil is at a level to keep the plants healthy, but that doesn't mean the soil is healthy. It can't support the right insect populations that were once there. There's a lot of things it can't do. And if I were to change that plant community to another plant community, that other group of plants, even plants that might have lived there 200 years ago, they're not going to do well in that soil because that soil is industrial soil. That soil's in the middle of a roadway. That soil's been driven over by equipment. Homes have been built there. That has nothing to do with the soil.
It's disturbed soil. And that's, again, Sean Kingzett, who we mentioned earlier, drove that home to me. He said, there's no such thing as natural soil, almost.
Well, there's remnants.
Right, there are remnants.
If you find a remnant
where you are.
prairie,
But if you're but we were talking urban and suburban areas.
Yeah,
okay.
no.
Urban and suburban, basically.
No.
There, you might get lucky and find something.
I told a woman in Chicago, I said, she goes, oh, I hate leaving the city. Okay, that's her choice. I said, but if you never leave the city of Chicago and you die, it's a shame that you've never touched the earth. There's no earth in Chicago. It's concrete upon fire.
Then what am I growing stuff in my little backyard?
Well, you're growing in industrial soil.
Well, I know that, but on the other hand...
But it's not the real earth. down below
you
that
can make
is
an
a,
argument that that doesn't exist anymore.
oh, it does though.
In some places,
Yeah, you could
but,
go.
but given that, you know what Doug Tallamy says, that we've converted 95% of the land in North America, or the United States, I guess he would say,
agricultural.
You know, that what is left, 5% that you might be able to
But
walk
that
on.
5%, that's what we learn from. That's what we learn, how we can create a new future with that 5% left. That's going to teach us what we can do, like we're doing at Yerkes, by putting in native grasses. We can rebuild that soil to become aboriginal soil. We can rebuild the soil so insects that used to live there can find and have a home
And
again.
I agree 100% that we should be going in that direction. One of the things I've done over the years, since 2017, and you know this because your partner participated in this, is something we call Chicago Excellence in Gardening Awards. And I created that because the city of Chicago had done awards for gardeners. They call it the Mayor's Landscaping Awards.
Garfield Park, they had the awards.
And they would do that, right?
Yeah.
And the mayor would show up, and Alder Critters would be there, and they did this for more than 50 years in the city of Chicago, and it didn't cost them a lot of money, and the goodwill was immeasurable, and it rewarded people who garden and contribute to their neighborhoods and contribute to the environment. Just wonderful stuff. And then Rahm Emanuel comes in and just says, we're not going to do this anymore. Boom, done. And it was just suddenly not there. And I got mad. And as I tell people, file this under be careful what you wish for. I said, if you're not going to do it, if City of Chicago is not going to do it, I'm going to do it. All right? And so we started this program that we open to anyone who lives in the city of Chicago, any type of garden, whether it's a parkway, a rooftop, a porch, a backyard, a school, a church, a business. We have.
Are you still doing this?
Yeah.
Oh,
we
good.
just gave out 65 awards in September of 2023. We've given out almost 300 gardening awards since we started the thing, and that's even with 2 years where we didn't do it because of the pandemic. We didn't go out and visit people. We did a video contest instead and had people send their videos in. But what was the point? It was about what people do in their yards. And one of the things we've really begun to emphasize is sustainability in your garden and native plants. One of the things that has discouraged me over the past couple of years, and I've looked at personally probably in those 2 years, 35, 40 gardens myself that I went out to judge, and you go to all different parts of the city.
That's very cool though.
It is cool because you get to see what people do, and they're so proud of their gardens, and it's so life affirming. However, the native plant palette is like 4.
Right.
You can count on Rudbeckia, Monarda.
Got a big blue stem in there anymore?
No, that's too
Indian
exotic.
grass?
That's too exotic.
Okay.
That's way too exotic. So it's Rudbeckia,
You got
Monarda,
echinacea.
Echinacea,
Echinacea, yeah.
and milkweed. Milkweed's a good thing because that shows that people have become aware that
Milkweed's
monarchs are in
good and
trouble.
bad. It's bad how it was presented to the public. Because when we had let's do as much as we can for the monarch and put milkweed out, all these nurseries got together and they started growing milkweed. But they grew the milkweed that would cover your house up, Syrica and Sullivanti, and they never informed the public how these spread. So when people would buy them, because everybody wanted to do something for the monarch, put them in their backyard, how do I get rid of this?
You don't.
It took over
Once
the
it's there.
whole backyard.
Well, in my yard, again, I have a small yard, so I can control it. I mean,
But the idea, what they should have shared that with people and said
they
this is-
should, and
this
and
is
I
an
tell
aggressive
people, I
plant,
say,
yeah.
you know, if you plant this, it's going to pop up next year where you don't want it.
All right.
And in some places, it might pop up where you want it. So
it'll
what
be
I do
everywhere.
is when it pops up someplace there I don't want it, I just cut it back.
Well, a solution would have been, and it would have made more money for the people that want to make more money.
No.
The people that
And
want
everybody
to
wants to make money.
sell Sullivanti and Syrica. The first thing you do is put in bunch grasses. Plant Asparagus and Bouteloua. put a thicket of those in, maybe 100 square feet, 50, whatever you want to do. Let them get 2 to 3 years old, and then put in the milkweed. And the bunch grasses will suppress the rhizomes of the milkweed and keep them contained. They'll weave around them, but that's called competition. So when you introduce competition to an Asclepias syrica sullivanti, they can't spread and take over.
Gesundheit.
Thank you. God bless you. So we could have sold more grasses, more plants, more Asclepias, and we would have had more beautiful gardens.
But that was part of what I was getting to on this as
that's
well.
Not discussed.
It's I said there's 4 natives that you see, and the occasional Joe Pyeweed, ooh, exciting,
right.
Or a native grass, but I don't find those. There's no sedges, virtually no sedges, and I do not understand why people don't know about planting sedges.
Because they don't make money.
One of the things they do is like the echinacea, they spread.
Some do, some don't.
Do. I have the ones in my yard have spread all over the place, and I don't care, because if I don't want it there, I dig it up from there, and I usually put it someplace else.
You usually, again, it's your best thing is to start with the more passive ones, let them create a community, and then you put in the thugs and bullies, because they can't go anywhere.
Well, see, I didn't know. I was just going, oh, sedges. This sounds great. I'm going to because Roy likes sedges. I'm putting sedges in my yard. And then suddenly, like palm sedge. Boy, that can be aggressive.
It is.
It's
it's opportunistic.
Yeah, but you know what I found also?
If I plant it in a community, it's not aggressive because it has competition.
Right.
If I plant it by itself within a garden, buckle up, because that'll seed everywhere.
It will, and there are several. Are you familiar with curly sedge? It's a small clumping sedge. I guess most sedges are clumping, but this is one that has taken over from my lawn.
Oh yeah,
and I love it because now I have a sedge.
Is it actually curly foliage?
No, I don't know why it's called curly.
Okay.
I have to look that up. Okay, and I think that's what the name of it is, but it's a small one that I planted on the edge of my gardens, and it encroached into calling it a lawn is a misnomer, because there's not, it's only so I can walk on my bare feet in my backyard.
Right.
All right. And now the sedges have pretty much taken over it, and they're great. They clump. I don't have to mow them.
I think it's in Riverside. They have it in Riverside. What we did in Riverside with Mike Collins, he's the arborist, a brilliant arborist in Riverside. And we donated, and Midwest Ground Covers donated sedges to plant around all their old oak trees. Well, not all, we did 2, because the idea was to get the momentum going and then have the community see the value of this sedge planting under the mature oak trees.
Right.
And then continue it all down Long Common. And again, that didn't quite go as far as we thought it would, because the community just doesn't have that sense of that value. But where we planted them, they did the same thing. They knitted together and they forced their way into the lawn. And they actually start to outcompete.
They outcompete the lawn, which is fine,
very cool,
as far as I'm concerned.
Oh yeah, this was very cool.
They're going to green up in the spring. You can trim them back if you need to, or you don't have to. It's kind of up to you. And they're soft and fuzzy. They're like tribbles from Star Trek. But
they have a low growing point, so you can mow them. They can get
I have mowed a couple of times.
Yes, that's why they were.
But generally I don't, and I don't care. It's just fine. But the problem is we haven't educated people to understand that those are important plants. There's a communication gap somehow, and because when you asked how I started in this, and when I was first a gardener, I was the kind of gardener that a lot of people are, is they open up the gardening magazine and go, that's pretty, I'll put that in my yard. Right. And that's all the thought they give to it. And they go, I must find that plant. And it's often a hybrid, and it's the latest and the greatest, and it's very funny because
it's what's new.
What?
People like to buy what's new.
They want, but they don't know how to grow what's old yet.
No.
So now my philosophy is, learn the basics first. Learn how to grow some natives. See how plants grow. Learn to understand that. And that'll help you understand when you have failures, when you're trying something a little more exotic. it seems to me. And that is how I've grown over the years, is that I don't, I skip over the articles about the latest and the greatest and the new. Who needs a blue rose, really? We don't. If there's people watching now, what did he just say? But I feel like just learn how to grow what was already here, and you'll understand more about plants and the soil.
It's like you call, just because it's new doesn't mean it's better, too. If you have a new plant, that doesn't mean it's better than.
And and actually the same applies to vegetables.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many vegetables you grow. 0. Okay.
My wife grows. She has food forest. She does a food forest in Lawndale.
Yeah.
You can go. You can go through her food forest, and you can eat while you're walking.
I know.
It's a beautiful thing.
And I do the same thing in my backyard. Again, tiny backyard. I throw in broccoli there, and I'm throwing in. I grew cantaloupe last year, and I have tomatoes. Some of them in containers, some of them in the ground, and they're interspersed with all of the perennials. Yeah, I even threw in some zinnias last year, and I'm kind of an annuals snob. All right, I don't impatience. No, thank you. But zinnias are wonderful plants, and I hadn't grown them in.
They come up easily too.
They
throw the seed out, and you gotta.
Well, actually, I was working at the Logan Square Farmers Market at the bazaar, and the guy in the booth next to ours had these little zinnia starts. And I said, "I'll take a dozen," and I threw them throughout the yard, and they just sort of weaved in and out, and butterflies love them, So, it's hard to complain about a zinnia, but here's what I will say about that. And again, I've noticed this from the Chicago Excellence in Gardening Awards and going out and looking at people's gardens. I think a lot of gardeners conflate native plants and pollinator-friendly plants, and they don't understand the difference that, and they think an echinacea is the same as a zinnia, and it's not. A zinnia obviously is an annual in our climate.
Oh, yeah. Right.
But they see the same results. The butterfly lands on the zinnia and the butterfly lands on the echinacea, and they go, they're the same. This is the same thing. But so that means they miss the whole point about what natives bring to our soil, to our ecosystems, how they work in communities with other plants, because the zinnia you have to introduce to the community every year if you want it. And if you don't, then the community changes. Whereas if the echinacea comes back with some sedges and whatever else you might have there, the community is now evolving, which is
it evolves, but it still needs human input, because it's a garden. So you still have to. A garden. Because I did the governor's mansion here in Wisconsin. This is about 10 years ago.
La-dee-da.
Well, it was nice because it was an honor to be asked, and the other part of it was when I got there, it was dominated. It was planted. It was 10 years old.
Yeah.
When I got there, it was the healthiest Aster novae angli and Echinacea purpureas and Tradescantia ohioensis I've ever seen.
That's all there was.
That's all there was. These three native plants seeded and took over about 2,000 square feet of gardens. And I asked, I said, I know there had to be other plants in here, but they were the healthiest looking plants. So
they were really happy, and that can happen.
Well, they seeded, but what the cool part was, this is what I saw. Every year they hired a contractor to keep that garden weeded. And every year they paid that contractor, I don't know, $5,000-$6,000 to weed that garden.
Yeah.
And every year they paid him $6,000, the garden got worse. So they were paying.
Were they pulling out the sedges? Is that what was going on?
No, they weren't weeding out the plants. They were taking over all the other plants. They weren't gardeners. They were landscapers.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what to do. And they never admitted they didn't know what to do. They just said, yeah, we'll take your money. We'll weed everything out. But what they did.
What they also didn't ask is, like, what do you want to accomplish in this garden?
Well, you can see you don't want the Echinacea New England Aster to take over and the spiderwort. Is that what? They don't have to. Gardeners don't ask things.
That's not a lot of biodiversity.
Gardeners understand relationships, and they can see a direction the garden is going, a direction you want it to go, you don't want it to go. They interact with the plants. The landscapers just took the $6,000 and pulled out the weeds. So they were being paid to make the garden worse. But it got to the level they could understand, and it never got bad. It got to their point of bad, but it never got worse.
Then, at some point, it becomes easy.
Oh, terribly
because
easy.
you don't have to make any decisions. You let those 3 plants.
But it wasn't enjoyable anymore.
Right.
There was no diversity,
no to somebody like you, but maybe to somebody else it was enjoyable.
Well, that could be, but
I'm just saying.
That could be, but to me, that person is a person that doesn't understand the things you just wanted people to understand.
No.
Diversity in relationships.
That's true.
So what you're asking people to understand, if that's what they want to believe is beautiful, then they'll never understand what you want them to understand.
So how do we get this across, Roy?
Well, what I did, I ripped out everything.
Okay.
And then at that time, that looked like a dramatic thing to do. But I had to, because I couldn't leave the thugs and bullies take over the neighborhood again.
You ripped out it all?
Everything. Everything went.
Did anybody say anything about that?
Well, we had to start with a clean slate. So every plant I put in a 4.5-inch pot, had a fair start to interact in a good relationship. And I used no thugs and bullies. So I didn't put any aggressive reseeders in. The echinaceas didn't go back in. I put an Echinacea pallida. Now, why would I use Echinacea pallida and not purpurea? I'll ask you that.
Because it's not a thug?
Right. It doesn't reseed heavily.
Yeah.
So I could put pallida in. I used 2 different kinds of pallidas. I used Hula Dancer and the other one. So I had character with the flower color. So when I put those plants in, I let them get established so they could create a solid community.
Yeah.
And then we worked in Echinacea alba and Echinacea purple in little moments.
Yeah.
But they had no way to take over because there's no opportunity.
Yeah.
The community was established, it was dense, and if they seeded, they had a rough time getting established because they couldn't take over the plants that were there. So we're looking at a system. And what we have to do is introduce people to planting systems.
Did you find that some of the plants you put in wanted to be thugs, and that might have caught you off guard a little bit?
Because I kind of know what was
Yeah,
happening.
you've been doing this long enough.
Yeah, Coreopsis verticillata might have been a little aggressive because it kind of leaned on something.
Coreopsis going. Because I never have enough sun. I don't have enough sun.
Yeah, this would lean a little bit. But then what we did do too, then they hired Steve became their gardener. So they actually got rid of the landscape people, said, we don't need you. We'll hire Steve, the gardener.
The landscape people.
But what happened with Steve, the gardener, was, Steve, there can't be that much to do in the garden. Why don't you go wash the cars today? Can you help us hang windows today? No, Steve's there to garden. He's not there to wash windows and wash cars. So when you got Steve washing cars and windows, the garden started to decline because he wasn't there gardening.
Oh, no.
Because it was the same thing. People don't think the gardener had that much value. Everything looks okay. So Steve quit because he wasn't gardening. And then I haven't been back in the last 6 years, so I don't know what the garden looks like.
It's probably a disaster.
Well, it could be because what I'm hoping for, I don't have thugs and bullies in there. I have more plants that respect their space.
Yeah.
So I think because the plants respect their space, that doesn't mean some couldn't have died or overtaken everything. But I didn't have...
But if they've got landscapers in there, who knows what they're pulling out and who knows what they're leaving?
Right. If the mowing guy was there, no offense to you mowing guys, but it could be they didn't know that Calaminta was a good plant, and they could have ripped it out and left a hole there and then stuffed a dandelion because they didn't know what else to put in there.
Well, no offense to you mowing guys, okay?
Yeah.
Just letting you know.
And there's a lot of mowing people, I have to include this, that I'm working with now in Lake Geneva. They want to be gardeners. They want to expand their income level, and they want to expand their love for what they do.
I can tell them where to start. Don't cut all your shrubs into ball shapes in September, okay?
That's a tough one.
I know. It's like telling
it's a hard habit to break.
Mulch. How do you? Right. It's like this weird instinct, and it's like. It's like moths attracted to a flame. Mm-hmm. It's like, I must volcano mulch. I must cut everything shrub into a ball shape. Yeah. Or some kind of geometric shape. That's the other
one. A hard thing, too, to give up is perfect turf. People pay a lot of money to have their turf perfect.
I beg people not to have perfect turf.
That's a tough one for them to give up Because there's a great guy in Madison, Jay, I forgot his last name. He does organic turf care. He's very good.
Oh, there's a lot of people who do
he's very
organic turf.
good.
You know, Midwest Grows Green is a good place for people to go to get information on how to do it right, which is stop throwing the chemicals down. Well, you know, it's like I often ask people, I say, you know what weed and feed is? And they go, I say, explain to me what weed and feed is. And they say, well, it's like you put stuff in to make the plants grow and then kill other plants. I go, right, exactly. And I said, do you know why they call it weed and feed? And they say no. And I say, it's because nobody would buy it if they called it synthetic fertility and poison, basically. All right. So that's not a marketing strategy, really.
No, right.
But that's what it is. Okay. I'm sorry. You're wiping out cultures. You're not just plant cultures, but it's having
affects
collateral
bacteria,
effect.
affects fungus in the soil, affects more. Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff. It's like you've already got a biological desert. You're making it even worse with that. In what? Because you want your lawn to look like your carpet in your living room.
Well, I think that's
it's not indoors.
What you mentioned before is, I think we have opportunities now to show people you can have a nice lawn organically maintained, but you got to have the right, like Jay, I wish I knew his last name, in Madison. When you look at his lawns, they are beautiful, organically done. But you got to interview the people properly, because you can't get the organic guy that just watched a YouTube and does it. He's not going to do that properly.
No, you got to have an understanding.
You have to have this is a knowledge-based systems approach to taking care.
Like doing anything right. It's you understand how the plant. You talked about the governor's garden and the plant communities involved. It's that the lawn care guys, the good ones, know the plant communities
They
involved
understand
as
right.
well. They understand
and they really understand soils.
Yeah.
When they use
well, nobody understands soils. The average gardener has no clue as to what's going on in the soil. All right.
Well,
and
it's just.
And I try to explain the soil food web to them, and you can just watch people's eyes glaze over but you do really need to know that.
Well, the simplest thing that helped me once, I was giving a talk at let's just say a talk. I don't want to tell you where I was at. I'm sitting with the head of head of agronomy department at Michigan State. He just retired.
Yeah.
And we're eating dinner, and I said, so what is your talk about? And he talked about how to create healthy soils. And he goes, Roy, hold out your hands like this. So I go, okay. So I'm holding out my hand. I got my plate of food here. And he goes, if your hands were filled with healthy soil, he said, healthy soil, these two hands, how many living things do you think would be in that 2 hands of soil? I said, 500,000, 300 million. The population of the United States is in this much soil. Oh, and then I'm thinking, no, this guy doesn't know what he's. I didn't believe him.
Yeah.
But then, well, he's the head of agronomy, the head of soils.
No, he's right.
And he's right.
Yeah, he's
the population of the United States.
And all people understand is that they look in the compost pile, and I say, if you want to know the soil food web, it's your compost pile. That is the soil food web right there. It is there because all that activity is happening, but all they see are worms, maybe some pill bugs, a few insects, and they think, well, that's it. But no, it's the microscopic as well, and it's the nematodes and the bacteria and the fungi,
and they all get strengthened and healthy by organic matter that comes from the living and dying of roots.
Yeah, and that's what
the living and dying of roots. Yeah,
that's one way you explained to me recently. Yeah, to fertilize your yard, let the roots live and die, and they're going to contribute a lot.
And you need the deep penetrating roots to get there too. You need that's why the bunch grasses, native bunch grasses, are so strong. The big blue stem, the Indian grass, they have tremendously fibrous and deep penetrating roots. And like Jerry was talking, they turn over their volume of roots every 3 years. That's a tremendous amount of organic matter. And I'm trying to picture that when Jerry's telling me, because this is so enlightening. I'm going home thinking, wow, is that cool?
Yeah.
That they
So how do we get that information out to the general public, which doesn't,
well, that's right.
I mean, try to explain the soil food web to people. It's, again, they're polite, but I don't, I can't tell them in 5 minutes stuff that I've learned
Right.
over 20 years.
Well, that's
All
what
right?
we're doing.
Or you've learned over more.
We're hoping at Yerkes.
Because you're much older than I am.
Well, I'm getting there. But at Yerkes, that's what we'll be sharing at Yerkes. We planted 2 gardens with native bunch grasses, 1,000 square feet. And Jerry's going to monitor that every 3 to 5 years to monitor soil temperature and soil moisture, and using Messick Prairie as the model at different depths. Because the whole idea is once you get that volume of organic matter and you get more soil infiltration and you get more soil moisture, because he said the soil moisture is like the capillaries in your skin. It's all filled with blood. All that organic matter will collect and hold moisture, so it will keep the soil temperatures from fluctuating. It'll balance out the soil temperatures, and then that's when you get those soil temperatures not fluctuating and soil moisture down to about 50% soil moisture, 36-inch depth, you're on your way to healthy soils.
The other thing I try to inform people about is letting everything in the fall just stay there in your garden. Stop cleaning up. Again, it's not your living room. This is not your bathtub, okay, where you're going to scrub it until it's absolutely, unless you're in my house. But, and the, Kelsey Shaw from Possibility Place Nursery. Again, one of the great things of interviewing all types of people like this, I get these great quotes. And he says that neatness is for losers. It's what, and that applies to your garden. The neater the garden, the worse it's going to be. And you have to let some things collapse. And as you say, why would you bring in wood mulch when every plant supplies its own mulch?
Every plant that's ever lived is self-mulching. They've always created their own stem and leaf fall that fell around them. They're self-mulching. There were no Native American tribes wood chipping the prairies. That never happened that I know of.
Oh, come on.
And there were no Potawatomi. They didn't have Potawatomi leaf blowers blowing all the leaves out of the Kettle Moraine into the Potawatomi landfill.
And the Ojibwe were not volcano mulching.
No,
okay,
they just didn't.
They were not.
No, and that's what gets back to, I think, what the plants have taught me since I started, especially growing them from seed and cuttings and division, is it's a systems approach. Like when I grow my plants, every plant, when I was producing 400,000 perennials a year, 300,000 went to Midwest ground covers. I had a schedule. My schedule was dictated not by me. It was dictated by all the plants I grew. They told me when's the best time to seed them, when's the best time to do the cutting. So I never ran Northwind. The plants ran the nursery. I just had to respond to what time it was and when to pot them, so how do I get a saleable Asparagus? If I want to grow Asparagus heterolepis and sell it in a gallon container, when would that be? So if I grew it, I start the seeds April 15th. I transplant them May 30th into a 2.5-inch container. In July 15th, I put them in a gallon. And September 1st, I can sell a gallon pot. So I can take a seed.
But everybody wants to buy them in the spring, Roy.
Well, then I carry them through the winter and sell them in the spring. So it's all that. It's kind of like launching the space shuttle. You just, is everybody here from lunch? Are we all here? Let's launch the space shuttle. Is Bob's okay? Can he come in?
No, Bob's not going to be able to make it.
There was a window of opportunity to launch it because of the rotation of the earth. Everything came into play.
Right.
And learning that from plants to produce them, it also gave me the intuitive way to look at them as how they live together. They have a certain way of cooperating with each other, and you'll never know how that square meter of prairie that has 22 species or 16 per square meter got that way. It took about 8,000 years for that to happen.
And how
do you backtrack that, and how do you plant that to reproduce it?
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that's a thinking process.
And we can destroy it in a matter of minutes.
Oh, we did. Well, we did.
We did, or hours. It's just a criminal what we did to the prairies.
It was agriculture.
I know.
It was food driven.
It was still criminal.
It wasn't people running out with kerosene.
Well, it wasn't agriculture.
It was
mostly
agriculture.
Yeah.
It was
which we have done all over the planet.
Yeah.
You know,
And at that time, what we did at that time was the way we knew how to grow the most amount of food we could grow. And
I read something recently, I think it was in National Geographic, that said that the hunter-gatherers actually were healthier than the the people who, than the people who found agriculture.
Once the Native Americans, the mound builders, switched their culture from collecting along rivers, grains along rivers. It was very general. They switched to a corn culture. They lost all their teeth. They switched to a whatever's in corn, the sweeteners in corn, and everything that was too thin. They lost
all the sugars.
In lost their teeth.
Yeah. Well,
So
how do we wrap this up? Because we've put everybody to sleep at this point.
We got 2 viewers now. There's probably 2 people.
Are there
Thank
2?
you for staying around.
We appreciate it. We're going to send you a prize, okay? We're going to send you the non-native plants that I ripped out of my yard. We'll send those to you.
Right, with a pumpkin seed. I guess just thank you. I appreciate
Well, it was great doing this.
Good conversation.
I mean,
and even if they don't watch it, I think we had a good time.
That's all that who cares about the rest of the people out there.
Yeah.
We're not making any money on this, folks. Just letting you know. But no, and now you owe me. Now you have to come on my show when I get back to it. And then folks who want to know where I am, you can go to MikeNowak.net, MikeNowak.net,
and rush there.
Now the videos up there on the YouTube channel are a little old, and I've got
but they haven't seen them.
15, 20 people watching them. It's great. I mean, I've just built up that audience over the years. Well,
I just know it's a lot of fun.
And now I got to drive all this way home through the snow. So wish me well. It's good
luck to you.
Yeah. Good talking to you.
Thanks, Mike. This was super.